It's the Hub City Hoops Talk podcast. We're coming off of a crazy win in Norman today, Jacob. 85-84 is the final score. What a freaking win, man.
I mean, you're put it, anytime you can get a road win in the Big 12, it's it's great. It was a hectic win. Your free throw shooting kind of got it done for you again. I mean, that's insane down the stretch how just absolute nails you were at the free throw line. And without that, you probably wouldn't have won this game.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like here, every recap we do, we're sitting here talking about free throw shooting, and once
Mm-hmm.
again, absolutely clutch. I think Tucson missed the back end of the
Yeah,
of the free throw at the end there, but it
he
ended
did.
up not being a fatal mistake, thankfully. But yeah, Pop Isaacs
Mm-hmm.
was 9 of 10 from the free throw line tonight, or today, I
Mm-hmm.
should say. Huge game from him. I mean, he struggled from deep today. He was 1 of 6 from three on the game. But he
Yeah.
put up 13 points in the second half. I think he had 3 assists in the second half as well. And just overall, I mean, dude, that pass he had at the end of the game there, where he lasered it
Mm-hmm.
across with his left hand,
Oh
to
yeah,
Chance McMillan in the corner. I mean, that was the play of the game for me. But yeah, man, let's
absolutely.
talk about Chance McMillan.
Superstar. Just I think he's making a case to be in the starting lineup. I don't think he
Yeah.
will be because I really like Kerwin there at the three. But I do like his ability to come off the bench and just some games, man, like just absolutely cannot guard him.
Yeah.
And he had 8 rebounds too. He had 8 rebounds, I
Three
believe.
offensive
Yeah, three
rebounds.
offensive rebounds, which is just was really really clutch for him in
Yep.
those moments. Obviously he's the best athlete on the team, and you saw it tonight. Like you
Yeah.
saw him out jumping and out rebounding 6'7", 6'8" guys at times, and it was just crazy insane from him. I mean, obviously the outside shooting kind of speaks for himself.
Yeah.
6 to 8. When everybody else is kind of struggling, the team went 9 of 23, and if you take chances, 6 of 8 out of that,
It's
I
bad.
mean, dude, it's terrible. That's 3 of 15. That's
Yeah,
like,
it was a rough shooting game for sure. I
oh, no
mean,
doubt.
6 of your 9 come from one player. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was there were a couple people I thought struggled pretty bad today. Darian Williams really struggled today.
He did, yeah.
That may have been his worst game as a Red Raider.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still so high on that guy. He's a sophomore. He's gonna have ups and downs, but he
Yeah.
really struggled today. And I feel like for Tech to be able to pull off a game where Pop Isaacs shoots 1 of 6 from three, Darian Williams really struggles throughout the entire game.
Well, I mean, you say struggles, and I feel like that only tells one part of the story because the dude shot 2 of 10, which is not good, but
Yeah,
he had 11 rebounds and 5 assists
he did pull up
on
some big
only
rebounds at the end
on
there.
only on only only one turnover too. I
Yeah,
mean, the dude, yeah, he really struggled offensively, but I
he
feel like
did.
he kind of found later in the game, kind of found a role that wasn't necessarily scoring,
I agree. Yeah,
and
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 that's what
really,
that's why he's so special though, because it's like
mhm,
he does
he's versatile.
everything. And I started to get a little concerned there. Otega Owe kind of started to take over, and I was like,
Yeah, he
I'm
did.
thinking in my head here, why is Kerwin Walton guarding Oklahoma's most athletic player? You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
Kerwin Walton may be the most unathletic player on the Texas Tech team, and that's no knock to him. I mean, he's a great player, but yeah, and then I mean, let's talk about the officiating tonight. I mean, it was
Oh boy.
terrible. It was so bad. I couldn't
Ooh.
believe they called a goaltending at the end there. It felt like Doug Sermon. I mean, they only showed like 1 or 2 replays, but it didn't look like a goaltending in real time, and it was
It
pretty
was
close.
no, it was very, very close. In the way the broadcast team kind of explained it made halfway sense to me that when they can review it that late in the
Yeah,
game, it's always nice for the refs to lean on the side of the call. But I agree, in real time, it didn't look like a goaltend. It's a very debatable goaltend. There were a few calls tonight that were questionable, and
yeah.
when old Dougie Boy's involved, there's always a couple questionable calls. But you know what? To me, it doesn't matter as much because you left there with a dub.
Yep.
Really, it should have been a 4 point dub, but you literally give Suarez a warm up jumper three at the end because you
Yeah.
didn't want to touch him to foul. But because you never know with the obviously the officials tonight or today,
Oh
you
my
didn't really
gosh.
know.
Yeah, if anyone would have breathed on him, it would have been a
Hmm.
foul. So smart for them just
Absolutely.
to stand away from the ball, of
Yep.
course.
They did, and I even saw there at the end. I forgot who was close to him, but somebody else kind of grabbed him. Was like, "Nah, just let him shoot the
Let him
ball."
go. Yeah. If I was McCaston, I would have been like, hey, just come to the bench, just let him shoot it.
I
Like, you
literally,
know,
I would have
yeah,
huddled around the coaching box and on the bench, just like do
yeah,
whatever you want.
I
You
agree.
have 2 seconds, like go for it.
Yeah, but the free throw shooting, man, final stretch of the game, so clutch. And then
Oh, it
listen to
was.
this. Check out this stat. So Tech closed the final 7 minutes and 30 seconds of the game on a 26-16 run. So
Yeah.
it's like this is starting to become a common theme for Texas Tech. I mean, they were
Yes, it
down by
is.
18 against BYU. They were
Hmm.
down by, I think, 9 or 10 with like 4 minutes to go against Kansas State.
Yep.
And now, obviously, against Oklahoma, down almost double digits with about seven
Hmm.
minutes left in the game. And they just really turned it on. It's back-to-back games for Texas Tech with 50 plus points in the second half. That's absurd. Like, let's talk about this offense. I mean, they looked rough in the first half at times.
It was rough.
They went on a 7 minute drought. So
Hmm.
put it this way, you still score, you score 85 points in the game. In 7 of those minutes of the game, you didn't even score a point.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's you kind of did what you did against BYU in the first half. I feel like you started to get down a little bit, and you really just wanted to start gaining it back by threes
Yeah,
instead of and they honestly they fixed that by the end of the first half when they
they did.
came storming back there and took it, got it within one at the half. I just I'm who man, like, so there are some points that concern me a little bit with the way that you have droughts in
Yeah.
scoring. Obviously nobody likes that. I think I read they were Oklahoma during that stretch kind of went on a 19-4 run.
Yeah.
It was just really, really rough. But I mean, obviously you came back from it. That's one of the things I like about this team a lot is that no matter the deficit, no matter the score, they're going to keep fighting. They're not giving up.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just incredible to watch. I sit here, we sit here and recap these games, and this is now
Hmm.
the third game where I think you and I pretty much expected it to be a loss, kind of heading into the final, 10 minutes of the
Yeah.
game. I mean, it turns out to be a win. I mean, and honestly, Tech had control of the final, minute and a half of that game. There was just a
Yeah.
lot of back
Hmm.
and forth foul calling. And of course, the refs calling touch fouls on Texas Tech in the last minute of the game. That frustrated me, of course. But yeah, I mean, they go on the road. They beat a Oklahoma team who's coming off a really tough loss to Texas,
Hmm.
a team who's only lost one game at home all season in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So to be able to go in there and beat them with the officiating you got, with Pop Isaac shooting the three so poorly, and really, Darian Williams struggling offensively, Joe Toussaint still kind of struggling offensively again. I think
He
that,
he had, I think he
yeah,
was better than the last couple
it
games, but
was,
he
yeah,
there are stretches where like kind of like we talked about earlier, like sometimes he drives to the rim and kind of expects a foul call.
yeah,
And obviously he didn't all I believe both of the times he went to the free throw line, they were on 1-on-ones off of,
yeah,
kind of late in the
intentionals,
game.
yeah.
Like he's still very good at driving to the rim. He had a couple really nice moves in the paint tonight. I just think, obviously in conference play, he's not going to get a bunch of those fouls like he's used to.
Yeah.
And so
14
it
points though and six assists
mhm.
on the game. He did have four
Yeah,
turnovers, so that was you'd
yeah,
like to
he
see that
struggled a bit.
obviously go down a little bit, but good to see him with six assists. I think that's what stands
Hmm.
out the most to me. And then Warren Washington too, man. I mean, the guy's just, he's so solid. I mean, he
Woo.
doesn't make many mistakes.
Oh yeah,
Sometimes he loses a little bit of intensity defensively, but I feel like
yeah.
it's not really. I think it's smart of him at some points because he's trying to stay out of foul trouble. He's like the one
Hmm.
guy that cannot afford to get into foul trouble for
No,
Tech. He's
no, he
literally the one
can't.
guy. But I think he had two or three assists in the second
He
half.
had, he had,
He was
yeah, he no,
he was
he had
dropping
two.
dimes. I tweeted
Hmm.
about it. He's just dropping dimes left and right. A lot of good
Yeah,
cutting and kind of backdoor cutting from Pop Isaacs a couple times in the second half there.
yeah. I
But
feel like he
man,
really took advantage of they really wanted to pressure after Chance McMillan hit that three in the corner out of that
yeah.
out of bounds play. They really started pressing the corners a bit because that's an area of strength for Texas Tech, and I feel like they were able to exploit that a good amount. And I
Yeah,
mean, he had three blocks too. When we're talking about
three
Warren
blocks.
Washington, like he I thought he really did an elite job in the paint. I feel like he got called for a couple of ticky tacky fouls that weren't necessarily being called at the other end of the floor, but
Yeah.
I feel like you know what especially at the end of the game, he did everything he could to stay out of foul trouble. He's been more than any of us could have ever imagined, I think, because he had 10, 7, 2 assists, 3 blocks, 0 turnovers,
Yeah.
and
5 of 6 from the field.
5 of 6. Like dude's just been nails.
Played 35 minutes as well.
Hmm
It's pretty,
That's been a huge thing for
yeah.
him. I mean, he's been able to pile on the minutes, and it really just doesn't seem to be slowing him down.
No, it doesn't. And yeah, I mean, just overall, I really thought that Texas Tech struggled for a good amount of that game. I thought
Hmm
that they were a little bit sloppy with the ball. They definitely got unlucky with the officiating at times. And funny enough, Texas Tech is actually one of the least, in terms of defensively, they get some of the lowest amount of foul calls on them and go to the free throw line the least in the Big 12, I believe, right now. So
Yeah.
defensively, they don't foul a lot. And it was like today, that was not the case. So again, all of this adversity, you're down big, you're getting pretty brutal foul calls. Even late
hmm
there, Texas Tech got kind of screwed a couple times. I mean, again, the goaltending, in my opinion, I thought it was a rough call. It looked like the ball was going up to me. And then also they got called for, I think, like
Yeah.
two touch fouls at the end there, with less than
hmm
2 minutes to go. So several of Oklahoma's points in the end there even came from free throws, actually.
Yeah, they did.
I did think Rivaldo Soares, he's actually, I believe he played at South Plains, right?
He
Junior
did.
college. Yeah,
Yeah.
so he was their
I
best
think
player today.
Texas Tech wanted him out of coming out of Coach Adams' staff, kind of wanted him
Yeah,
out of
yeah, I think he
JUCO.
ended up going to Oregon, right? And
Yeah,
then
he
he went
did.
to Oklahoma. He was good
Yes,
today, though. I was also
he
impressed with
was.
Uzan, and obviously Otega Owe
Hmm
is really good as well. But Tech really
Yeah.
shut down their front court. That's the one
hmm
thing that I will say is Texas Tech has like one true big man on their roster. I mean,
hmm
literally, I mean, I don't think anyone considers
Yeah.
Darian Williams like a big man. I mean, Robert Jennings is definitely more of a traditional, four. But they don't really have a ton of length in their front court. And I was really worried about Hughley from the Pitt transfer.
Yeah.
He I think he knocked down 2 threes on the game,
Yeah.
but
He had a couple
he had
threes.
a couple threes, but it feels like Texas Tech really does a good job
Hmm
defensively against pretty decent front courts. And that's
Yeah.
been the theme of conference play so far. I mean, Tech shut down, Texas's front court, who I think is pretty decent.
hmm
Obviously got blown out by Houston, but against BYU, they struggled against Khalifa a little bit, but overall they play the front court really well for it not really being a strength of the team.
Yeah. Most definitely. And I feel like offensive rebounding wasn't a big issue. Let me see what the
It
stats were.
wasn't. Yeah, it
Yeah. I
really
mean, I
wasn't.
think like Oklahoma had 12 offensive rebounds.
Tech
Texas Tech
has,
had 7. I mean, and obviously they came from 2 players, Darian Williams and Chance McMillan, but
yeah.
I don't they may have had more, but I just don't it wasn't noticeable
Yeah. Yeah, I
for
agree.
sure.
It wasn't noticeable, and I think like heading into the matchup, that was one thing I was pretty concerned about was
Hmm
rebounding. But the total rebound total was 32-34. Oklahoma had,
Yeah.
+2 on the boards. So overall, really impressive stuff. Yeah, McMillan, man, he was so impressive. Like we talked about him a lot this offseason when we were working at 247 Sports. And
Yeah.
I mean, he was the one guy that you go back and watch his tape from Grand Canyon, and this guy is a elite scorer.
hmm
He can do it, catch and shoot. He can do it with the ball in his hands. And now you're kind of seeing like his athleticism, kind of just put some people on notice almost. I mean, he had that
Yeah.
pretty nasty alley oop, which should have probably been an and one in the first half.
Yeah.
And then I mean, you're right about him jumping out of the gym for a couple rebounds. I mean, there were a couple of
hmm
times where I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy he can jump.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really not a huge surprise to see him succeeding, but it is to see him doing this on the road, I think is what's so impressive to me.
Yes, incredibly. I mean, his 2 highest scoring games so far this season have both been on the road.
They have, yeah. So
And I
he had what
mean,
24. I mean, he went
he had
eight of
20
11 from against
he had
Butler.
20 yeah, he had 24 against Butler at 27 tonight. And speaking of like outside shooters, like Kerwin Walton didn't have just this spectacular game. Obviously, he fouled out with about 8 minutes
Yeah.
left, but he had a couple of buckets that were one dribble pull up, and then he had that reverse layup that
Yeah, he did.
you don't see from him very often. It's very encouraging to see. I think there's been a big development for a bunch of guys that now instead of just shooting threes, they can get to the rim.
Yeah.
They're working on their pull up jumpers. Just really fascinated to see the development.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one thing about the final thought on the refs. You know
Mm-hmm.
the refs are bad whenever Kerwin Walton fouls out.
Yeah,
Because that guy doesn't really play defense. So Kerwin Walton fouling out, that may be his first foul out of his career. I don't really know, but
yeah,
he doesn't foul out a lot. He doesn't foul a lot in general.
no.
He's pretty soft defensively. Like he kind of
Mm-hmm.
like he doesn't really put a lot of pressure on ball, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's just it's the there is a trend there with Texas Tech's guards.
Mm-hmm.
Every guard this year for Texas Tech has taken a big step up from where they were last year. I mean, you could literally say that.
Absolutely.
Pop Isaacs again. I mean, he was so freaking clutch at the end of the game there, man. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
it's so impressive to watch because I feel like in that final like 7, 8 minutes, Pop he just goes into a different zone. Like he's so
Yeah,
focused. He's not making any
I
mistakes
agree.
with the ball. He's not
Mm-hmm.
forcing anything. And that like as a young guard who is leading the conference in scoring right now, he's obviously a deadly shooter. He was a prolific recruit coming out of high school. For him to be able to keep his composure at the end of the game and not
Mm-hmm.
force things, it's seriously it's so incredible to me.
It is to me as well, and something that I've begun to notice is in timeouts, he's coaching. He's not being a
Yeah.
player. He's coaching. And McCaslin has kind of said that in post game pressers and stuff that he's the guy in the timeout huddle that says the right things
Yep.
and helps get everybody motivated and focused in. And I definitely saw that in the shots they had during timeouts today, and it's really impressive to see his kind of development.
Yeah, I mean, it really does feel like he's becoming the leader of the team, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, he's a true sophomore from an age standpoint, one of the younger players on the team, but it really feels like he's becoming the leader of this team. If Pop Isaacs can be this clutch moving forward in crunch time for Texas Tech, and then you have the surrounding cast who is also really solid. I mean, look out, right? Like Texas Tech's here at the top of the Big 12 once again.
Yep.
This was kind of a trap game for me. It felt like you're coming off a big win at
Mm-hmm.
BYU or against BYU at home.
Yeah.
You had a full week off, and you're playing an Oklahoma team who's coming off of a pretty tough loss against Texas.
Mm-hmm.
You go on a 7 minute scoring drought. You're down big, heading into the final 8 minutes of the game. It says so much about this team. I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm like, okay, Texas Tech's going to be ranked in the 15 to 20 range next week. They're definitely not going to be. I mean, yeah, 15 is very viable actually because they're 20
Yeah.
right now. 15 is very viable. They're at the top of the Big 12. They have one more tough road game against TCU, but then they go home
Mm-hmm.
again with Cincinnati, which is a winnable game. And they have a very favorable schedule to finish the season. You and I have talked about this.
Absolutely.
So it's like, watch out. I mean, Texas Tech's not out of this. And
No.
don't be surprised if you start to see Texas Tech creep into the 5 seed line, the 6 seed line.
Mm-hmm.
I think right now they're projected by most to be 7 to 8 right now. That's going to go down pretty significantly after this win. And Texas Tech picks up another Q1 win. So that is
That's
back-to-back Q1
insane.
wins. Yeah, I think Oklahoma's like 33 in the net right now. So anything in the top 75 against on the road was considered Q1 for those watching. But yeah, I think Tech moved to 500 on Q1 wins as well.
That's crazy. And like we talk about, this is they're in the middle of their toughest 4 game stretch right now,
Yep,
and they're 2-1.
two and
That's
one.
crazy. I mean, I thought I really thought they could go 1-3 in this stretch
I did too.
and be
Yeah,
okay going forward. But now it's like, holy crap. At worst, you're ending up 2-2 if you lose to TCU on Tuesday.
yeah. Which is what you
But
I sat here and told our viewers that that's a win. Go 2-2.
exactly. Going 2-2 is a win in that 4 game stretch. I mean, you face, probably your toughest competition in Houston. Obviously, you lost.
Yeah,
You come home to a team in BYU who's you don't necessarily match up very well with. I didn't think because all the things that Khalifa can do from
yeah,
the center position, they just have so many freaking shooters. And
Their
they got
offense
hot
is
against you.
lethal.
It is, and they got really hot against you at the start of the game. Obviously,
Yeah.
you get this big win. I also thought this might be a trap game. You just kind of for the same reasons you said, and you're coming home. You're going. I say you're coming home. I mean it. You're going to TCU on Tuesday. That's like everybody calls that Lubbock East.
And it
Okay,
looks like
like
TCU's down 35-40 right now at Baylor.
yeah.
So Texas Tech may have another game where they're having to play a road opponent coming off of a
Mhm.
loss. So
Yeah, and those are tough because in the
they're
Big
tough.
12 there's no nights off, okay? There's no
Yep.
team that you can look at and be like we're going to beat these guys.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to say, "Well, what about Oklahoma State?" Oklahoma State almost beat Kansas State,
Yeah.
okay? Oklahoma has been in most of their games. I mean, what do they lead? What do they lead us by? 9
9
at
with
one point.
7:30 remaining.
Yeah, in the I think it was in the first half, but either way, like they're good. They have good players. I didn't think they were going to win the Big 12. I didn't think they were going to make the tournament, but they're not a bad team. And
Yep.
all of a sudden, West Virginia looks good. Obviously they get their best player back here pretty soon. Um, UCF beat Kansas. I
Yep.
mean,
And Texas on the
and
road.
Texas. I mean, just everybody's good.
Everyone's
You're gonna
good.
you're gonna have four teams that probably miss the NCAA tournament, or five teams, whatever
Yeah.
it ends up being. But those teams are probably going to go to the NIT if they choose. I mean, obviously some might not. If they choose, and they're probably going to kick butt because that's just kind of how this conference is. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, it really is insane, and I think like that's what I'm saying. Where I'm going with this for Tech to be able to go steal a road win against a really
Mm-hmm.
good Oklahoma team. I mean, Oklahoma has beaten some pretty good teams this year, and there's a reason why they were ranked number 11 in the AP poll.
Yeah,
Obviously, they've lost back to back. They need to regroup, but they are a solid team. They're projected to be pretty well off into the tournament right now. We'll see what happens. They obviously need a rebound, but to be able to go on the road and steal a win against a really good coach, Porter Moser is a great coach in the Big 12.
absolutely.
To be able to do that after Oklahoma's coming off of a loss, because the psychology for a coach and for a team coming off of a loss is like, hey, we're at home again. This is a must win for us. This in Oklahoma's mind, this was a must win for them, and it's like they had the
Mm-hmm.
lead, they felt good about things. And Tech just kind of stayed there. They stayed calm. And they're just freak, man. Tech is clutch down the stretch. I think that, in recent memory, I can't remember a Tech team. Obviously, the Final Four team was very, clutch, but they also had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
leads going into games. I mean, this is that's a team that just kind of dominated people from start to finish. This Texas Tech
Absolutely.
team, they get themselves into some holes. They have some, they have some flaws offensively every now and then. But for them just to stick around, show their composure, especially with, this is a younger team than Grant McCaslin would have liked because Devin Cambridge went down earlier in the season and he was really a leader of this team. He's an athlete.
Yeah.
So Tech's playing a lot of ball with, they obviously have Toussaint and Warren Washington, who are their veterans and they're kind of their
Mm-hmm.
leaders, but they're also playing with Pop Isaacs, who's a true sophomore, and Darian Williams, who's a true sophomore. And some of their rotational players, Lamar Washington, Robert Jennings, all sophomores.
Mm-hmm.
So incredible stuff. Grant McCaslin, I think I saw a tweet. He deserves to be the Big 12 Coach of the Year right now. If things keep up, I absolutely
I
agree.
would agree.
And
Yeah.
honestly, man, after watching Houston today, after watching what they did to Kansas State, I don't feel so bad about that loss anymore.
I don't. It was tough because I feel like for a lot of the first half, you could see like, hey, we're almost there.
Yeah.
We're close. And then the second half, I think their defense just kind of
Yep.
that's what they do to everybody. They just kind of suffocated us, and they got it became really hard to take shots and became really hard to score the ball. And I'm just really really happy we don't have to play them again
Yeah, me too. I would like to
because
play them in Lubbock. I think that it does
yeah,
feel like their defensive or not effort, but their defensive performance maybe kind of
drops a bit.
it drops a little bit on the road. And I think
Hmm.
they also got a lot of favorable calls from the officials at home, and they continue to do so. They
Hmm.
are very physical. Like I said, at our previous pod when we recap the game, I'm surprised they don't get called for 30 fouls a game. It's pretty they foul a
No,
lot,
they
It's
foul a
like
lot.
they foul a lot.
Hmm.
But
They
yeah,
just
I don't
Mhm.
feel so bad about that loss anymore. And I really, man, it's hard to believe that Texas Tech is at the top of the Big 12 right now. They have,
Mhm.
this has been their toughest stretch of the year. They had a little bit of a soft opening to the conference, but
Yeah.
that Texas is looking better now. They obviously lost to BYU on the road, but I think they jumped up to like 28 in a lot of the ranking sites. Evan Maya, I think, had them at 28. So they're jumping up analytically. They jumped up in the net. So for Texas Tech now has two really good road wins against Texas and Oklahoma. Um,
Mhm.
Pretty funny stuff, by the way, too. Texas Tech having the last laugh with both. Well, Texas gets to play Texas Tech again at home in Lubbock this year, but
Yeah, they get to come back here. I'm fat if they continue to play very well, which I don't know, they might.
they just don't have a defense. Like
They just exactly.
they don't play a lot of defense, which is
And
shocking.
clearly they've historically not played well here in Lubbock.
Yeah,
I mean, at least the past few years since old Beardy Boy kind of riled the fan base up. But it's gonna be contested. Okay. And those
it
of you
is.
watching right now that don't think there's gonna be 100 kids that show up with horns down shirts, okay, you're mistaken. And I bet you can't get all of them to take their shirts off. Okay.
Yeah,
BYU, I'm looking at
I
you.
can't believe that. I still can't believe that.
Okay. I cannot believe that someone from Texas bullied BYU, poor innocent BYU, into and taking their shirts off.
Yeah, it's
It's a
pretty bad,
shame.
but good for BYU for bouncing back. It that was I feel like a must win for them, and
Absolutely.
I think Texas actually led by 3 or something in the first half, but
Mm-hmm.
anyways, what an incredible win. So now we go to TCU on Tuesday, like you
Yep.
said. I'm pretty scared about that matchup, to be honest. I think TCU is very similar to Houston, as they're very
Yes.
old, they're very long, they're very athletic.
They've got, yeah.
So it's going to be it's not the ideal matchup for Texas Tech in my opinion. But I mean, listen, the reality is now, maybe outside of Houston, I legitimately think that no one is going to win at Houston this year, not a single team.
No,
But outside of Houston, I think Tech can compete with anyone on their home court. I really do.
I do too.
I think they
Mm-hmm.
could. I don't. Maybe Iowa State because they're so damn good at home, but I think Tech.
Yeah.
They're really good at home. But outside of maybe those two teams, I really feel like Tech can go anywhere and compete. I'm not too worried about the atmosphere. I mean, Oklahoma too, man. They have to have one of the worst. I mean, outside of Oklahoma State, their atmosphere is just it's sad. It really is. Like I don't know
Yeah.
what
It
it
wouldn't.
is. It's just they have a
Well,
good amount of people there. They're just not very loud.
you see, Austin. Oklahoma is a football, softball school. Okay.
Appears
I
that way.
mean, it just that's where they. I mean, honestly, from an athletic standpoint, from an NIL standpoint, that's where they put their money.
Yeah, you're
And I
right.
mean, for softball, it makes if softball and football. I mean, it makes sense. Like football's won national championships in the past. They're always pretty competitive. Obviously, their softball is just going to run through everybody. I remember Texas Tech softball. I think they lost by one this year in one of the games against Oklahoma, and it was a huge deal because they're like, "Oh wow, we almost beat them." Because in years past, it's been like 22-1 in all these games, and that just goes to show you where Oklahoma puts their money. They
Yeah,
don't put it into basketball, and their women's basketball team is very good as well.
it is.
And
Yeah, true.
they can't get people to show up to the women's games, and I know we have that same issue at Texas Tech.
Yeah.
But I've been in those women's games, and the environment is still very, very good. The people cheer.
Yeah. Yeah, I
It
mean the
gets
Tech
loud,
fans are loud. It's like
hmm
that's the biggest difference. It
and that's just
feels like Oklahoma. Just the fans are just like,
they're
they're
just there.
older. They're sitting in the seats. They're just there to watch the game. They're not really. It's just not a very
Yeah,
rowdy
it's
environment. Let's just
not.
say that.
It's not, and I don't know how to. I mean, clearly, I don't know how to change that. Like I thought Porter Moser would bring some energy to that
Yeah.
crowd, but he just hasn't so far. And
No.
I don't know if it's his fault. Like
It's. I mean,
he's obviously made this team very, very good.
yeah, and that's what's so shocking. I mean, this is a Saturday game, top
Hmm
25 matchup. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's not about that, that the stadium's empty. It's just their stadium's not very loud. And I
Yeah.
thought that there were, that stuff matters. I mean, go ask Grant McCaslin. That's a
Hmm.
huge reason why they won against Kansas State. A huge reason
Absolutely.
why they came back against BYU.
Hmm.
So it really does stink for Porter Moser. I'm a big fan of his, so it
I
stinks for
am as
him.
well.
But again, you and I talked about this yesterday, but we weren't too scared about the environment being a factor in this game. But yeah, it is what it is for them. But Tech moves on to TCU. Again, I don't love the matchup, but the great news is for Tech fans is like we've done what we've needed to do. Tech has
Yeah.
already secured a 2-2 finish on this 4 game stretch at worst. And
Hmm.
that's against BYU, I believe, when Tech beat them. Do you remember what their AP ranking was? I can't remember what it was. It was definitely in the top 15, I believe.
Yeah, it
Um,
was definitely in the top
and
15.
then, they obviously lost to Houston, who's playing like the
Hmm.
best team in the country right now.
Yeah.
Maybe outside of a couple, they're definitely a
Hmm.
top 5 team. They got the win tonight against Oklahoma, who is right now ranked in the AP, 11 in the AP.
Hmm.
Obviously, that's going to drop, but they're still a top 35-ish net team, still pretty
Hmm.
high on Ken Palm. I think they were 34 on Ken Palm or something like
Yeah.
that. But it's a big win. And so no, regardless of what happens, that's what makes us better. Like in Grant McCaslin's mind, he's not going to look at it like we are, but Tech has already won. Like they've already won the 4 game stretch.
Absolutely. Like we've talked about a bunch. Like this is the 4 game stretch where a lot of like Ken Palm and Bart Torvik had the Red Raiders losing 4 in a row.
They did. You're right.
And I was like, if you can get 2 of those, that's a really big win. And so they've gotten 2 of those. It's a really big win analytically for the stretch. Um, I don't know how TCU goes. I could see it going one of two ways. Obviously, we can come out hot and win, or we couldn't. We don't really match up very well.
No, we don't. And it's still, I mean, again, I don't want to act like the schedule gets easy from here on out. I definitely
Hmm.
think there's some favorable game. The last 6 game stretch is really where
Very
you
favorable.
get, 3 out of your last 4 are at home. So
Hmm.
that's always good. Tech is favored to win their last 6 games. Actually, sorry, they're favored now to win their last 7 games.
Yeah.
And so it's looking good for Tech at the end stretch here. But just, I mean, we're sitting here today. Tech's going to move to 16-3, 5-1 in conference play.
Hmm.
They're a 3-point dog right now on Bart Torvik, but that could fall even lower because if TCU loses at Baylor, that's going to hurt their rankings a little bit. But then after TCU, you got Cincinnati at home, which again, it's going to be a tough game. Like,
Absolutely.
Tech hasn't just like dominated people at home either. There's been
No,
some close
it's
games.
yeah, absolutely. I think obviously you always come out on top at home, but there's just, with the exception of the end of the Oklahoma State game, there just really hasn't been very many you just route people.
Yep.
And I think that would be a huge confidence boost if, I mean, like you said, what would happen if they could put 40 minutes together?
It's true.
Like
Yeah. It's
like right now
scary.
you're probably playing really good basketball 30 out of the 40 minutes and you're beating people like good teams. Like
Yep.
what happens if you could put 40 together, man? That'd be crazy.
Just like play decent in the first half. That's all I
Hmm.
ask. But
Yeah.
I'm also cool with scoring 50 points every game in the second half.
Hmm.
That sets Tech up for success
Yeah,
no matter what
most
happens.
definitely.
But actually, and also I did misspeak. So Tech actually has 2 of their last 4 games are at home.
Hmm.
But their 2 road games in their final 4 or at West Virginia and at Oklahoma State. You feel good about them splitting at least 1-1 there, but there's a great chance you could
Yeah.
get 2. I think that Tech could match up
I'd
decently
be
well
I'd be
with
good
West
with I'd be
Virginia.
good with 1-1 there. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the thing. I think Texas Tech matches up well with both of those teams. Um, West Virginia, I mean, they have some talent definitely, but depth has been kind of an issue.
Yeah.
Um, just kind of the system they run is kind of, I wouldn't say wonky. It's different.
Yeah.
They run a lot of what Huggins runs, but a little bit changed up because they have a new coach. But they're a fascinating team to watch because some nights they look like they can be a tournament team, and other nights they look terrible. So
Yep.
we'll see.
And I mean Bart Torvik has Tech right now as about a 6-point favorite even on the
Hmm.
road. So
That
just
sounds
something to
about
keep
right.
in mind. But So, Jacob, what a freaking win, man. We'll wrap this one up today, guys, but we'll go ahead and get a preview for TCU live, hopefully Monday. There are some good matchups there that we could point out for you
Absolutely.
guys. And I'd also like to do a power rankings for the Big 12 this week. I think that would be fun. I think you have to have Tech in that 2 range right now. Obviously, Houston has to be number 1.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'll be a fun one to do. But Jacob, thanks for your time today, man. Thanks everyone for listening. Please subscribe if you haven't already. We're getting pretty close to 100 subscribers. Would mean a lot for us if you could do that. But yeah, have a good day, guys.